بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم به نستعين نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسول الكريم أما بعد اللهم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. So Alhamdulillah, last week we did some lessons, but unfortunately due to some technical issues we weren't able to do the slides here on the screen. So this week, inshallah, I'll just do a brief recap of that. We'll just go through those slides and then we'll continue. And then hopefully tonight, inshallah, we will conclude our discussion on ijma'. And then from next week, inshallah, we'll be starting with the next discussion, which deals with qiyas. Inshallah. So the types of ijma', as we discussed last week, that in terms of how the ijma' becomes established, ijma' is divided into two categories. Right? How did this agreement amongst this particular level of scholars, how did it occur? So this, we find two categories. Number one is ijma' sarih, ijma' that is clearly established. And number two is ijma' sukuti, ijma' that is tacitly established. In other words, some of the mujtahidun, in the one instance, all of the mujtahidun agree and their opinions are clearly stated. In the other one, some of the mujtahidun agreed, but not all of them have clearly stated their position or their answer, because some of them remain silent, they remain quiet. That is sukut. So as far as ijma' sarih is concerned, this is ijma' that is clearly established. So this kind of ijma' is established when the opinion of all the mujtahidun on a particular matter are established to be in agreement, either through the express statement. All right? Somebody asks them and they say, this is my ruling. Somebody writes to them, they write their ruling. Or it is known through their conduct. When they themselves become confronted with the similar scenario, then they conduct themselves in a particular manner which makes it clear that their conduct is in agreement with the opinions of the remainder of the mujtahidun. So this kind of ijma', it is as if the mujtahidun all gathered in one place. Now I would like for you, for purposes of our discussion that will come after this, to keep this statement in mind. It is as if. It is as if. It means they did not really all come together in one place at one point in time to discuss this matter and give a collective ruling. All right? But their rulings are the same as if they did come together, right, in one place and made a joint decision after each one expressed his opinion clearly regarding the particular matter. So like this group of people, they gather in the masjid, there's a mas'ala, each one gives his verdict and all of their verdicts concurs and comes together as if it is one verdict. So thereafter their opinions converged into one single opinion. It's different people who have this qualification, who have this level of expertise, and they then give their opinions, and thereafter it appears as though all of their opinions comes down to one opinion, and all of them gives the same ruling regarding the particular matter. So such a consensus becomes established as proof with the majority of the scholars. So this then becomes a qat'i proof, a clear proof, because all of them agreed and have the same ruling. Then the second category is ijma' sukuti. This is ijma' that is tacitly established. In other words, it is implied. It is not clearly stated, but we understand it to have come into existence because of certain circumstances. So this kind of ijma' is established when some, for example, we've got 10 recognized mujtahidun. 5 or 6 of them They have clearly stated their ruling regarding a particular matter. Regarding a particular matter. And the remainder of the mujtahidun of that era remain silent and do not express a contradictory opinion. So there's two things. One, they remain silent. They don't say a particular ruling. And number two, they didn't also give a ruling that was contrary to the ruling of those scholars. And then number three, they did not openly or in any way that was known to the people object to the ruling of the other scholars when that ruling became known to them. Say, for example, there's 10 scholars, 6 of them agree, and they state their opinion. 4 of them remain quiet. So 4 of them remain quiet. They also didn't express a contrary opinion to that. And when they became known, one of those opinions, so it's not necessarily all 6 opinions must reach them. If one of those scholars' opinion reaches them and they do not object to that opinion, then it means that they would not have objected to the opinion of the others as well. So it's only necessary that one of those opinions reaches him. So the opinion reaches him. He himself doesn't give another opinion. He does not object to that opinion, and he does not contradict that opinion. So 3 things. He remains silent, he doesn't contradict, nor does he object. Which means that in the absence of those 3 things, it is then considered that he also accepted by his silence that opinion. So there are 2 primary views regarding this ijma sukuti. There are 2 views regarding ijma sukuti. The first view is the view of the Maliki and the Shafi scholars. So the view of the Maliki and the Shafi scholars is that such ijma is not considered to be established, nor is it regarded as proof. So in the absence of it being confirmed that everybody did actually agree, then the Shafi and the Maliki say, then in that case you can't say that there is ijma. Because you can only, according to this view, say that there is ijma once you have confirmed that everybody actually made an opinion. So they do not then accept the ijma sukuti. Alright? So this group considers that the silence of the remainder of the mujtahidun regarding the particular ruling cannot automatically, and this is important, it cannot automatically be regarded as the agreement or approval. They say it cannot automatically be regarded. Then they give certain criteria which they say can indicate why there was no express agreement or approval. Right? Then they give certain criteria. What is that? Because they say there are various reasons why they may have remained silent or abstained from expressing a contrary opinion, such as number 1, the lack of having investigated the particular matter. Because this particular matter, this scholar, he receives the opinion, but he has not yet investigated and done ijtihad with regards to this matter. So he did not immediately give an opinion or give a verdict. Or number 2, out of respect for the view of the mujtahid who gave that view. So it does not necessarily mean that he agrees with it. It is just that he respects that this is that person's opinion and I respect his opinion. This is his opinion and I respect this opinion. So according to this view, the silence can therefore not automatically be regarded as an approval and agreement. Then the second view is the view of the Ahnaf and the Hanbalis. So they say that such ijma is considered to be established and it is also considered to be a qat'i proof. And they give 2 reasons for why they have this opinion, why they have this view. Number 1 is the ability to be aware of the opinions of every mujtahid regarding every matter is generally impossible. They agree it is generally impossible for every mujtahid in a particular era Because they live in different countries. Sometimes they can be scattered over different continents. Might be some of them in East Asia, North Asia, West Asia, South Asia, in that different, Arab countries. There might be some of them in Africa. There might even have been some of them in Europe or in China or any other place in the world. So it is not generally possible for all of them to be aware of the opinions of everybody else. And generally the opinions of some mujtahidun becomes spread and others would remain silent. However, it is such that some mujtahidun who were considered to be the most prominent mujtahidun, and Allah Ta'ala made it such. That is why today we only find generally 4 madhahib. There were other madhahib as well, there were other mujtahidun as well, but generally these 4 madhahib's opinions and their teachings became preserved and it became transmitted. And as a result, they were the more commonly known opinions. So from amongst all of the mujtahidun, there are those who became well known and their opinions became therefore well known and widespread. So it's not such that every mujtahid's opinion was automatically generally known. And then number 2, the general tendency was that the opinions of the most prominent mujtahidun, like Imam Ash-Shafi, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, and in every era there would be the people who would be their contemporaries. Like Imam Abu Hanifa, he had his contemporaries. Imam Malik had his contemporaries. Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, they were contemporaries. Imam Shafi was the student of Imam Malik and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal was the student of Imam Shafi'i, rahimahumullah. So the most prominent mujtahidun in any era, their opinions would become known and those less prominent would remain silent and abide by the views of those more prominent. In our legal system, we have almost like a similar system. We have a system in our law where you've got different levels of courts. So you've got the magistrates court, then you've got the regional court, and then you've got the high court, then you've got the appeal court, and then you've got the constitutional court. So like this, all of these people who are the magistrates or the judges, they are all legally qualified. But they've got different levels of experience. So the ruling would then be that the one who is located in a higher court, if he makes a decision, then the one in the lower court is governed by that decision. So if the high court makes a decision, for example, in Western Cape, if the High Court in the Western Cape makes a decision, then all the magistrates in the Western Cape are governed by the decision of the High Court. However, the High Courts in the other provinces, they are not governed by this, like the senior mujtahidun. Then you find that there is an appeal court where the senior judges from the country are gathered. So now if the appeal court makes a decision, that level of judges makes a decision, then all of the high courts and magistrates courts are governed by that decision. Why? Because they recognize that the people who have made the decision are the people who are above us, especially if it is a unanimous decision. And then above that you find the constitutional court that deals with particular matters relating to constitutional principles. So if that constitutional court, that is regarded to be the highest court in our country that deals with constitutional matters, if they again make a decision, then the appeal court and all the other courts are governed by that. So that is why they are referred to as justice, not judge. In the lower courts, they call you a magistrate. Then in the high court, they call you a judge. In the appellate division, they call you a judge of appeal or an appeal judge. In the constitutional court, they call you a justice. like a mujtahid, mutlaq. So in the same way, then the decision of that group of people is binding on everybody else in the country, including the government. The government is bound by it, and every citizen in South Africa, whether you are educated or uneducated, you are then subject to that decision. In the same way, we've got different levels of mujtahidun. And this principle is telling us that when the senior mujtahidun used to give rulings, then the junior ones would abide by those rulings. So when the highest level of mujtahidun came together and they had agreement on a ruling, then all of the others below them would remain quiet. And they would accept that, because they would recognize that these are the people that have the highest say. Now, what is for me so strange is that the Ummah today can accept these kinds of principles when it comes to the modern courts, but when it comes to matters of Sharia, then they've got a problem with it. Then we've got the problem with the rulings of the mujtahidun. If the constitutional judge makes a ruling, then we say, no, the constitutional court decided. If the mujtahidun made a ruling, we say, who are they? Who are they? It's mind-boggling. Anyway, so the ruling would then be that if the senior people made a decision, then those who were junior, they would abide by this. And they would then remain silent. Now you see let's say, for example, the seniors in your family, your uncles, your father and his brothers, they come together to decide a matter and they make a decision. And then you walk in and say, no, I don't accept this decision. How we regard that? Your father and all of his brothers, who are the senior people in your family, come together and they make a decision. And then you come and you say, no, but I don't agree with this. Now, where do you stand in relation to their decision? Do you have an authority to challenge their decision? Why not? Because they are the highest level of authority in your family. So in the same way, we have people of different levels of authority within our deen, based on their qualifications and their expertise. So it's not to say that they made the law. They didn't make the law. They interpreted the law. And now, I don't know if I mentioned it here, you know what is our problem today? I mentioned it in the tafsir class, no? The English translation of our Quran and the English translation of our Islamic literature that becomes the sources of our Sharia, like our books of Hadith, etc., the translation of those books into English, it has put us in a great deception. Because it has made us understood, or assume rather, that we now know the Quran. And we also think we can now interpret the Quran. And we also think that we now know the Hadith and we can also interpret the Hadith. In the Quran, Allah Ta'ala, as I mentioned in the tafsir class, speaks about inzal and tanzil. Anzalna, nazzalna. What is the difference? In the English, both are translated as revealed. But is it the same? In the Quran, Allah Ta'ala speaks about a man hitting a wife. Wadribuhunna. So, daraba, the word is daraba. And at the same time, Allah uses the same verb to say, Daraballahu mathalan. Allah Ta'ala says, Daraballahu mathalan. Allah Ta'ala strikes, daraba, mathalan, an example. Wadribuhunna, strike the woman. Now, what is the difference between striking an example and striking a woman? It's the same verb. Now, how did Allah strike the example? Allah used a hammer. What is meant by the word strike an example? Is it literal? It's figurative. It's figurative. And strike a woman? Is it literal? Huh? Are you sure? Are you an expert in the Arabic language? Give me all the meanings of the word daraba. Now that's the problem. That's the problem. When Allah says strike an example, we understand it cannot mean literal. But when He says strike a woman, we automatically understand it to mean to be literal, without knowing all of the different meanings of the word daraba. You see the problem we have? Because strike and strike. Now why you say that strike means this, but this strike means different? Why you say that strike isn't actually strike, but this strike is strike? Both are strike. Translated in English, strike, strike. What's the difference? Moenie maat jy, strike net. You understand the problem we sit? When we assume to understand what the Quran is saying just based on English translations, because both of them will tell you, strike, an example, strike a woman. One we say, no, does it actually mean strike? Other we say, no, it means strike. Based on what interpretation? How many meanings does the word daraba have? Now you see where the problem comes in? So the one who is an expert in Arabic language, not me, I can't even properly understand Arabic. When we're speaking about those people that look into the Arabic, into the Quran, and they can understand that what is meant here is not that, what is meant here is not that, because they understand the usage. That's why Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says that if you want to know the meanings of words in the Quran, then you have to be familiar with the language of the classic Arabic poets. Now I can tell you, if I bring one sentence in classic Arabic poetry, you won't understand it, and I also won't understand it. Imam Shafi rahimahullah spent years just studying the Arabic language to such an extent that he went to go and live in the desert. And one of the things that, boggled him was that Allah Ta'ala refers to the Quran as mata'ul ghurur. So what does mata'? Oh, now what does mata' mean? What does mata' mean? The normal understanding of it is something. Mata', hada mata', these things. So when he was in the desert with the Bedouin Arabs, who used from the purest of Arabic language, he heard a lady use this word mata'. So then when he asked them, well, what does this mata' refer to? You know what it referred to? When a lady's got haid and she's bleeding, she uses something to soak up the blood so that her clothes does not become soiled. Now after this cloth or whatever she used to soak up the blood is dirty, she takes it and throws it away and uses something clean. Now that piece of cloth that is soaked with the dirty blood of haid, the Bedouin Arabs called that mata'. Mata'ul ghurur. Like a dirty piece of cloth that just deceives you. Now, in the English translation, how is it translated? That is why the people who interpret the Quran and the people who interpret the Hadith are no ordinary scholars. They are people who have that level of understanding. Why? Just first of all with the Arabic language. There was one scholar who started writing a tafsir. And then he started writing, because the Quran starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Then he started writing with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. He started writing tafsir, starting from the Bab, the Bismillah. Right? All of this. And then he discovered he was already going into third volume. He was already going to his third volume only on Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The meaning of that statement. Then he thought, I can't go so much into this. Then he started with Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. By the time he finished, just with Surah Fatiha, he had written 10 volumes. So he stopped. Because this is the depth of the Arabic language. And now we translate this language into English, which one of our scholars beautifully refers to as a cripple language, because it doesn't have the capacity to give proper meaning to the Arabic. Because like this, you would have to, for one word, give paragraphs just to translate the one word and give meaning to it. So these are the people that looked into this. And they don't necessarily say it, but you see, when you and I read something, we only see the black and white. When they read it, they see the deeper meanings behind it. Now it is assumed that when they write something, that the person who reads it with those deeper meanings. In terms of every word, wallah, if you see how our fuqaha wrote, when we translate it, it's one thing. But if you go into the meaning of each of those words that they have put down there, you find that there's a lesson and an explanation behind every word. We do the simple translation, then we think that that is what it means. But then we are very far from the point. Very far from the point. Allah give us tawfiq. Right? So they therefore conclude that their silence would be tantamount to the approval and agreement. Right? So the one view is that you cannot assume it because there's reasons why they may have stayed silent. And the second view is that generally it would not have been possible, and generally the juniors follow the opinion of the seniors, so therefore it is considered that their silence would then be an agreement. So the dominant view that is considered amongst the scholars regarding ijma sukuti is that it would be regarded as a proof. If any indication is found that those mujtahidun who remained silent were in agreement and approval of the particular opinion, and the possibility that could prevent the ijma from taking place or the silence from being regarded as a disapproval or disagreement disappears. So in other words, the only reason there is from their silence, you cannot understand that there was any reason for them to disapprove or to disagree with that opinion. You cannot, there's no indication in the circumstances of their silence. In other words, there was no reason for them to be scared to give an opinion. And then also to determine whether it was an opinion of a senior mujtahid or a junior mujtahid. If it was a senior mujtahid and the junior one stayed silent, then his silence is considered to have been an approval. So the reason for this is that the majority of the ijma of the companions, please remember this as well, were of this nature, where some of the mujtahidun from amongst them would clearly express their opinion regarding a matter, and others from amongst the mujtahidun among them would remain silent. So if there are no indications that the silence was on the basis of approval and agreement, then the ijma sukuti. So in this instance here, where the dominant view is that it is a proof, meaning that the ijma sukuti would be a qat'i proof. It would be a qat'i proof that all of them agreed. However, if you cannot ascertain that the silence was for the purpose of approval or agreement, then the ijma sukuti will be regarded as dhanni proof and not qat'i proof. So this is a balance between the two opinions. In other words, the one view says it's not a proof, the other view says it is a proof. And it is considered to be a proof if you cannot show that the silence was for any other reason other than agreement. However, if you can show that there was possibly another reason besides the agreement, once there's any indication that there could have been another reason why they remained silent, then it is still accepted as a proof. It is just not accepted as a qat'i proof, as a decisive proof. Now our next discussion is the possibility of the ijma taking place. How can we consider that the ijma did take place if the mujtahidun scholars are scattered in different parts of the world? So some of the Mu'tazila and also the Shia, they claim that ijma is not possible. They say it's impossible to achieve ijma. And they state this due to two reasons. They state this due to two reasons. The first reason they say is that the existence of ijma in any era is dependent on the agreement of the mujtahidun of that era. The mujtahidun of that era, they must all agree. And for that agreement to be able to achieve, two things is necessary. Number one is, you must know who are the mujtahidun. In other words, you must know who are the people whose opinions must be considered. So unless the identity of the mujtahidun are known, then you cannot say that there is ijma. And the second thing is that you must know what was their opinions. You must know what was their opinions, or alternatively to this, you must know that they knew the opinions of the others, and for no other reason than their agreement, they remained silent. And they therefore consider that both of these two things are impossible. It is not possible for you to know all of the mujtahidun of a particular era, and it is also not possible for you to know all of their opinions. And why is that? Because you do not find a definite set of rules to determine who exactly is a mujtahid and who is not in any particular time. Who was regarded to be the mujtahidun? That was via scholarly consensus. Because who would know who the scholars are? The scholars. So it was a form of recognition given to scholars by other scholars, that that particular scholar had reached a certain degree of competence in the ability to extract rules and laws to clarify them from the Quran and the Hadith. Because it's not like the person went to a school and studied to become a mujtahid and then he was given. Some of the mujtahidun, besides their studies, it was a capacity they acquired over time through research and development of their own abilities and capabilities. And because the scholars are scattered throughout the world and the capabilities of each one was not definitely known to everybody. All right? So, and this is the second one, it was not possible to have them all in one place in one particular time. You couldn't call a meeting. Nowadays it's possible because you can have an annual event where all of the mujtahidun come together and they discuss certain matters. It is also even possible by way of Zoom and Skype. In other words, there's means available how the recognized scholars in our era are able to communicate with one another at the same time and then give their verdicts on a particular matter in order to ascertain whether they all agree or not. But in those days, it was not possible because it required days and weeks and months of journey to get from the one to the other. Right? And it was also not therefore possible to know their opinions regarding a particular matter at that time. So you couldn't know, number one, who exactly they were. You were not able to get them all together at one place. And number three, you couldn't know exactly what was all of their opinions regarding that matter at the same time. Now, these opinions in time also became compiled, and through this compilation of the opinions, it became known what was their opinions, and therefore we could determine on what there was ijma. So the second reason they give is that the opinions of those who are known and do agree is either regarded as qat'i proof. In other words, this is coming in with the ijma sukuti. They say, so therefore you say that if you don't have the opinions of all of them, but those who are well known, you have their opinions, then it would mean that their opinions together would either be a qat'i proof, but then in that case, you don't need ijma. Because then you only need to say that it is necessary for some of the scholars to agree, and not all of them. Or it is considered to be a dhanni proof. You say that no, it's not a qat'i proof, because if it is a qat'i proof, it means you cannot dispute that proof. Rather, it is a dhanni proof, which is open to interpretation. And in such a case, you would be stuck to accept it as a dhanni proof, which can be disputed, because you cannot prove that all of the other mujtahidun had actually agreed with it. So this then creates a conundrum, a problem for us to determine whether or not there is ijma regarding a particular matter or not. However, these things were considered, but they are not the general practice of the ummah. It's not the general practice of the ummah. So therefore, the majority of the scholars of the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, from the time of the Sahaba, from the time of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they abide by the ruling of the possibility, imkanul inqi'adil ijma. The possibility of the taking place of the ijma. In other words, remember what I mentioned? It is as if, we don't say that they actually all came together, but because we find that their rulings was the same or is the same, we therefore consider it as if they did actually. That's why I told you to remember back then, as if, because it comes into this practice here that we have within the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that we consider that it was possible to consider, it is possible to consider that there is ijma, because of either they all did express the same opinion, or the majority of them expressed the same opinion, who were the senior and the well-known, and that those who were lesser than them, they remain silent, and that their silence is considered to be an approval, unless we find that there was another reason for their silence. So we therefore work on the possibility of ijma and not its actual occurrence. In other words, the actual occurrence means that they all came together at one place at the same time and they made a ruling. Because it is regarded to have taken place through their actions meaning either their statements or their writings or their actual implementation. And why is this also? Because the Sahaba are considered to have agreed by consensus on this manner on a number of things. Number one being the fighting of the murtaddeen and those who refuse to pay zakah. You don't find that Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he was the Khalifa, he made this ruling. Some of the companions, they had a difference of opinion, but those who even had a difference of opinion, they subsequently all agreed, and thereafter everybody did it. So the fact that everybody did it was an indication that they all agreed. Same with those who refused to give zakah. They fought against those people compiling the Quran. You don't find that all of the companions individually, but you find that the compilation was accepted by everyone. So that acceptance by everyone means that this was their ijma by way of practice, the ijma sukuti. Also giving a grandmother, the paternal grandmother, a share of inheritance in the place of the mother. So there's no mother, there's no father, and the Sharia says that a mother, but there's a grandmother. There's a grandmother who's alive, mother and father is passed on, then the grandmother will be given a share equal to what the mother would have achieved, and she would be considered to be in place of the mother. This is by way of the ijma of the Sahaba. There's a hadith also, in fact, we just did this hadith today in Bukhari. Alright? The prohibition of selling food before it is received. I order food, I get somebody to make food for me, and he must still bring the food, but I already sell the food. There's ijma on this. Why? You cannot sell something before you don't have it. So if I want to sell food, I must first get the food, then I can sell it. But I order it and then I sell it, then such a transaction can be cancelled. And then the correctness of nikah, even if the dowry is not mentioned. All right? So this is referred to as ijma bil fi'l. Ijma bil fi'l, ijma through occurrence. It happened and it was accepted like that. So the majority of the scholars consider the ijma through occurrence to take place with regards to many incidents in the time of the Sahaba. So these consensuses is based on Shari'i sources. In other words, there is an ayah in the Quran that was referred to, or there is a hadith of the Prophet that was referred to, and all of them agreed on the ruling that was taken from this ayah. All of them agreed on the ruling that was taken from this particular hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So after this consensus is reached amongst them, you cannot dispute it. And then there's matters that is derived through ijtihad. If the ruling is not clear in the Quran or clear in the hadith, but through ijtihad a ruling is made, then such a ruling we don't refer to automatically as ijma. We don't automatically refer to as ijma. Unless and until it is confirmed that all of the mujtahidun who had done this ijtihad also agree. In such matters, it would be best to say that there are many opinions in this matter in which we do not know of any differences, but we don't automatically call it ijma. Such matters, according to the majority of the scholars, fall within the ambit of ijma al-dhanni and not ijma qati. In other words, it is referred to as ijma sukuti, but which is questionable and is not qat'i, so you can question that ijma. So an example of this is the mudaraba transaction, which we find even here, our Al-Baraka Bank uses it. So some scholars have agreed on its permissibility because it was done during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and thereafter, also after the time of the Prophet, it's done up until today. And no one objected to it. Mudaraba means that I employ somebody to sell something for me or to buy something for me on condition that he receives a percentage of the profit. He gets a cut in the profits. Because there's no clear proof for this kind of transaction in the Quran, nor in the Hadith. But it was the practice, and this practice was not opposed by anyone, and this practice was approved. So because of this approval, this tacit approval, it is considered to be established due to ijma. So I'll conclude my lesson for tonight, and also the discussion on ijma on two statements. One by Imam Shafi'i, one by Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. So Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah stated that matters which are not a way of any agreement should not automatically be called matters of ijma. In other words, if you know of a particular ruling and you know that this ruling, it is the ruling of this scholar and it's the ruling of that scholar, you cannot automatically say that this is a ruling through ijma. You first need to see whether those people who are entitled to give rulings have actually agreed with this, or alternatively, whether they became aware of it and they did not object to it. So you must establish that there is actually ijma sarih, or you must establish that there is ijma sukuti before you can refer to a matter as having been established through ijma. That is what Ahmad bin Hanbal says, that the one who claims there is ijma has spoken a lie. The one who just claims ijma. And this is to avoid people from just saying, no, this must be done through it because there is ijma. That must be done because there is ijma. In other words, the same as the Imam Shafi, you cannot automatically claim a matter is established through ijma unless you have proof that it has been agreed upon by the scholars. So one should not just claim ijma unless he has done the required research to establish that there is actually ijma in that particular matter. So may Allah Ta'ala give us all tawfiq. And I will conclude on that. وَبِنَكْتَفِي جزاكم الله سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت. Yeah, I'm just going to put this thing off quickly because we need to go to the adhan. You can ask the question.
You mentioned where the grandmother can inherit, see that the mother passed away.
Yeah.
Right? So does that apply for, say for argument's sake, the father passed away?
And then the grandfather can come in place of the father.
And the mother didn't pay
Yeah, but what you must bear in mind is what you were asking is got nothing to do with the grandmother scenario. You started with the grandmother scenario, but the actual question you were asking is completely unrelated.
Talking about the same line, you know,
No,
father, son.
your question is if a person was entitled to inherit,